Time to talk money with our fortnightly money expert. She's a financial journalist and an author, and she has been at a debate, Mary. Not a debate that many of us would probably go to for entertainment, but it seemed like it was right up your alley.
Absolutely.
Were you speaking at the debate?
No.
Okay.
No,
you were just watching.
Yeah, there were three people on each side, and they were pretty much all fund managers who were there, and they were debating between active and passive management of KiwiSaver funds.
Yeah.
And actually, I can't remember, it was just KiwiSaver funds, but it might have been funds in general, but it doesn't matter.
I'm just going to move your little microphone up there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
give us a second here.
Yeah, is that working now?
Yeah, that's better.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Bear with us, listeners.
Yeah, we'll get it sorted. So the Financial Markets Authority, the FMA, set up this debate because the FMA is very interested in KiwiSaver, and some of the majority of KiwiSaver fund providers are active. In other words, they have people choosing which shares and bonds, etc., they're going to buy to put into the funds, and what ones they're going to sell and when they're going to do it, etc. But a minority are called passive or tracker or index fund managers. It's all the same thing. And they basically just buy all the shares in the share market index and put that in their fund, and they don't buy and sell. Yeah. They don't guess which shares. I shouldn't say guess, because the active fund managers will say, no, we don't guess.
Well, I know. I was going to say, you're hardly the most popular person among New Zealand fund managers.
No, that's right. Yeah, they're still polite.
Yeah, some nerve turning up to their debate.
Yes.
Waltzing around.
Yes. Well,
they know what you think of them.
The FMA invited me, so they were, yes.
I mean, some people go to summer music festivals, Mary, but you were at the FMA.
That's right. It was much more interesting. And look, it was meant to be quite light-hearted, and in some ways it was. There were a few sort of shenanigans and that kind of thing going on, but there was also a few barbs shot across the room, I have to say. Yeah. And the winners were the active fund managers. And look, I mean, maybe the vote was just on people in the audience had to stand up to say whether they supported one side or the other. And I suspect a lot of the people who supported active like active management better. They think it's the way to go. And so whether or not they thought the debaters debated better is, and I, to be honest, have to say that I'm just a dyed-in-the-wool passive fund advocate, and have been since the 1970s when they were very first started in America.
So you don't get the sense that anyone in the room was turning up with an open mind, ready to be convinced the other way?
Probably not many. And I have to confess that, that I was terribly biased too, so I was thinking, good point made by the passive people.
But your bias was based on the facts, Mary.
Well, I like to say that, Jesse. Yeah,
that's what Trump supporters say as well,
Well,
everyone thinks they're based on the facts, but no, carry on.
Yes, you can, you can certainly select the facts you want, but I thought there was some interesting comments made on both sides, and several times I was itching to stand up and say, hey, there's a counter-argument to that, but of course I was only in the audience, so I couldn't. I mean, one particular...
Well, that's the thing with the debaters, with some of the people arguing for passive funds, were they actually involved with passive funds themselves, or were they all active fund managers?
Yeah. Okay. No, the passive passive people were passive managers. Yeah. Simplicity and Smart Shares. And then Jardins, a woman from Jardins, which is more of a share broker, I think, basically. And then we had three active fund managers on the other side. Okay. And
but I'm sure they would have appreciated your assistance as well if you had, started heckling.
Well, one side might have more than the other. Yeah. But one of the arguments that I really thought, oh, come on, this doesn't really wash, is that one of the active fund managers said, look, our record is this. We've scored better than average returns over just about every year in recent years. I mean, I can't remember the exact statistics, but and I thought, there are always going to be, in any period, some active fund managers who do better than The thing is, the passive fund managers just do the market average, or always
By
will.
definition.
By definition, that's right. And so the active ones do better sometimes and worse sometimes than the average. And one of the active managers said, well, our fund has done way better than average for quite a long time. And I thought, well, yes, if you were one of the many active fund managers whose fund had done worse than average in recent times, you would not be turning up at that debate. There's got to be a bias in who agreed to come and debate on the active side. It's going to be only people who have in recent years been what I would call the lucky ones, although that would annoy them. They'd say, no, they're the skillful ones, the talented ones. Yes. Yeah. So I thought that argument didn't wash, just that for one fund manager to say, well, my funds have done better than average in recent times, that wasn't...
I mean, on the surface, it is a pretty compelling argument if it's been consistent.
Well, if all the active managers have done better than average, but this was only one.
The debate wasn't which is better, passive fund management or this guy.
That's right. The debate, exactly. And this guy or woman, I'm going to be I'm mysterious about that, which gender the person was, but the person was saying that theirs had done particularly well lately, and there always will be some who for a while do better than average, because that's just the way the maths works, you know. But after a while, I mean, a lot of research shows that after a while, the ones who've done better than average after a while don't do better than average anymore. And I mean...
Did you go up and say that to the guy afterwards? Or the woman?
I didn't.
Research shows you're due for some failure, mates.
Yeah. No, I think I probably expressed that before, and certainly have in the columns. But the one argument that I always make here too is that even if one of the active fund managers did really have a person there who was really gifted at picking which shares are going to do well in the future, and that's the crux of the matter, that I maintain you can't pick which shares are going to do well in the future. That if a company's prospects look good, that's already discounted into the share price and it's higher than it otherwise would be. And so that it's a crap game. You know, you can... I've told you before...
A craps game.
Yeah, something like that. That Lusha, the chimp in Russia, beat a whole lot of the active fund managers there, and people throwing darts at the share price list in the newspaper can do better than a lot of the active managers.
Well, how is that? I always think of you every summer when the Herald runs the thing where they ask all the fund managers to pick what the shares are going to be that do well, and then they run last year's results, and the results are always terrible.
Yes, they are. They often are, aren't they?
Why would you agree to take part?
Yes, I know. They're very brave, those people. I mean, maybe all publicity is good publicity. Maybe. And look, I don't know. I agree. I always wonder about that too. But even if an active fund manager...
The Herald should ask a chimp.
Yes, they should. And that would be a great idea, wouldn't it?
Or a weka.
Yes, get a little kiwi to peck holes and pick which seeds it wants to eat or something like that. I always argue that if one active manager really did have somebody who was super at picking shares, then the word's going to get out in the industry that this particular person really has got what it takes to foretell which shares are going to do well. And what's going to happen? If that person really did have that gift, all the other fund managers are going to be offering them huge salaries. And then, you know, how do you and I know that our KiwiSaver fund provider has still got that genius in their ranks?
Right.
Yeah, we don't. We don't know. So a couple of other arguments made in the debate. Do you want to read them out, or shall I just read?
One of the managers said, "I would like to introduce you to the number 0," and he or she had a prop, a 0. This represents the number of passive funds that are designed to outperform their index this year, next year, and forever.
Yes, and so it's easiest to say he with this one. He was saying that passive funds never outperform the index that they're based on. Outperform mean doing better than the index. And he's absolutely right. They don't. That's the point. They just perform as the index performs.
They are the
and
index.
They are. That's exactly right. And meanwhile, the active funds, some of them do better and some of them do worse, and they charge quite a lot higher fees because they've got to pay for these people that do a lot of research and choose what shares to buy and sell, and they've got to pay for the fact that they're trading more often, so there's more brokerage and more other lots of other costs in there. Yeah. So I thought, well, that's a very weak argument, I'm afraid. Sorry. Despite his lovely zero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the next one says, well, the problem is the evidence. The problem is the numbers. Simply put, active management is a zero-sum game. You have the winners, and he points to his team, and the losers, and he points to the other team, and he says, in every active trade, someone beats the market and someone loses and underperforms the market, and then you add the fees.
Yeah, and that argument was made by...
Oh, sorry, that was the passive manager saying that.
A passive manager, and he was just pointing out that...
Oh, sorry, I put everyone wrong there. So the passive person was saying about the active people that it's a zero-sum game, so for every winner there is a loser.
That's right, yes. And so every time somebody buys a share in the expectation that it's going to grow faster than the market, it might and it might not. And if it does, that person's won and the person who sold the share has lost because they've just got rid of a really good share. So every time there's a trade on one side or another, the buyer or the seller is going to end up being glad they did that, and the other one's going to end up being unhappy they did it. And that just by definition. And so that's what they mean by a zero-sum game, that the one will gain 1% and another will lose 1%, and it sums back onto zero. And that's absolutely right.
Before the fees, yeah.
Yes. And then, as this guy said, and then you add the fees. And so for the actives, Fund A is going to do better than average this year. And it might continue for the next 2 or 3 years, maybe. But then the chances are very high that it'll have some below average years as well. And over the long term, and don't forget, if you're in these, we're talking here about funds that hold largely shares, KiwiSaver and other funds that hold largely shares. So they're higher risk funds. You shouldn't be in them unless you've got 10 years or more to play with. And over 10 years or more, you'll get different active managers doing really well one year and badly the next year. And it sums up to zero, and then by the time you take the fees off, they tend to do worse.
You've done worse than passives,
yeah.
Another active manager said that and by the way, if you've just tuned in, I'm talking to Mary Holm. She's been at a debate between the managers of active funds, share funds, and passive share funds about which is best. And one of the points an active manager said was that, quote, the reality for investors in any market to have any outcomes at all, let alone best outcomes, you have to use active management. Without active investors, passive markets are stagnant elephant graveyards.
Active management makes the world go round.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's actually a different point, and you brought this up a few times ago, and I said, look, when we've got time, we need to talk about that. So active managers now, in America in particular, passive's really catching up with active. It's become a kind of in thing after all these years, from the 70s on. It's just slowly, people have become more and more aware.
They've started reading back issues of your columns,
well,
Mary.
that must be right. And people like Warren Buffett, who is an active manager, but he has said, especially for individual investors, and that it's best just to go passive. He advocates it. And so in America, and to a growing extent in New Zealand too, passive's becoming more popular, especially in America. And there's people who are expressing concern that means the markets will no longer be very efficient. The share market won't be efficient because the market gets to be efficient because active managers are buying and selling shares, and individual shareholders. But the individual shareholders are only buying and selling tiny parcels, really. The ones that really move the market are these people that are in funds that are buying, spending millions of dollars in their transactions, these big American funds. And so the active managers have always been there buying and selling, and the demand sets the price for the shares. If there's more wanting to buy than sell, then the prices will go up, and the reverse. And so that's how the share market really works. It needs to have active people in there buying and selling. And so the argument is, gosh, if everything becomes passive, the markets won't be efficiently priced anymore.
Yeah.
And people, that'll be terribly confusing. But there's a couple of arguments against that. One is that because active managers trade way more often, even though they might be becoming less dominant in America in terms of total funds traded, they're still very dominant in terms of the number of trades because they do a lot more trading. So, they might be getting smaller and smaller in total, but they're the ones who are trading. So even if they get quite small, still most of the trading is still always has been done by them and always will be. So
instead of counting the fund managers, we should be counting the trades to get a good view of what's going on.
And the researchers who've done that have said, look, there's no worries for a long, long time yet. The other argument is that active managers count on beating everybody else to the knowledge that a company is going to do well or do badly, do better than we expected or worse than we all expected, and get in first and buy or sell shares on that knowledge before anyone else has the knowledge. Yeah. And if there become fewer and fewer active managers out there, it's going to be easier and easier for them to actually beat the market. There are fewer competitors, and that's going to just encourage them to keep doing it, and others to come in. They're going to say, there's hardly any active managers in there anymore. I'm going to come in too, and I'm going to try and beat the market. And human nature being what it is, you see, this whole concept's about people not settling for average. And I say you should settle for average. Average is good. Average with low fees is better than average with high fees, with the high fee one being all over the place, sometimes above average, sometimes below average, but in the long run, they're average. But there's a whole lot of people who say, no, I can do better than average. And I think that human nature says that's always going to be there. So I'm just not at all worried.
So, yes, you think there might be a sort of a basement level for active managers that it won't go below.
Yep.
And because at a certain point it becomes just too tempting to get back and start actively trading again.
If you're in any competition, if you know that there are hardly any others in there, you're much more likely to go in, really, aren't you?
Because if Apple said, hey, we're closing down all our factories in China because of coronavirus, a passive fund wouldn't react to that.
That's right. They'd still be holding Apple shares. That's another argument that gets made, that active management is better when the markets are going down. And it's simply not true. The data shows that that's not the case. Active fund managers say we can act. We can get in and sell our shares when the markets are going down, whereas passive has got to just sit there and hold them. Yeah. But in fact, actives most of them don't get to pick to sell shares before they've gone down. Any effect the coronavirus is likely to have on share prices is already reflected in those prices. Yeah. It has been for weeks, and as every piece of new news comes out, people are going to act on it straight away. And you and I and the ordinary average fund manager are not going to be able to win with that knowledge. It's already pushed the price up or pushed the price down.
So was that next comment was sort of covered there, that active management makes the world go round, or is that a different point that they were making?
No, that's the same. Yeah. That's the same point there. Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit worried that some people listening to this might be confused about the whole thing. It's a bit complicated in a way to just discuss on the radio rather than having an article where you can perhaps go back and read it and think about it. And so just the basic message is that I think passive management is better. And the easiest way to tell if a fund is active or passive is to look for low fees, because nearly all the low fees, not absolutely all, but nearly all the low fee ones are passive. And in the long run, that's your better bet, I think. And I wasn't convinced otherwise by the debate.
And that's your general advice anyway with KiwiSaver funds, to go with the ones with low fees.
Yes.
And bonus, if you go for the low fee one, you'll probably end up with a passive fund.
That's right. Yes.
Thanks for coming in.
It's a pleasure, Jesse.
If you did get lost along the way, you can go back and listen to it again. You can listen to all of Mary's chats in podcast form. Head to rnz.co.nz and go to our series and podcasts page.